I am live. Let me get live on Instagram and we're going to jump right in. All right. So I was gone last week because I was on vacation, needed to take a break because everybody needs vacations and everybody needs breaks. So I'm back this week. And as always, oh, there's my clock popping up as always. Let me see if I can drink over here. So as always, when I come on my weekly live comics chat, I'm here to talk about items that caught my attention in comic book fandom, in comic book world, in comic book media during the week. I don't cover everything because number one, is too much to cover. Number two, I'm not interested in everything. So what I cover on my broadcast is, again, things that caught my interest, things that I think are important and significant to talk about. So what I'm going to try to do today, I'm going to try to actually talk about three different things. I was trying to debate if I should make, my live stream about one, but I was like, each one of them is really important to me. Each one of them had a lot of conversation about it this week, albeit in different venues and at different levels. Okay, so let me put that on the screen. So what we're going to talk about today is Super Zombies Webs. I know that doesn't make any sense, but it will before I'm done. Okay? Super Zombies Webs. That's what we're going to talk about today. So first off, what we're going to talk about is James Gunn's Superman announcement, and we're going to include talking about Supergirl with that too. So let me pull up. Let me pull up this article. Should have that on your screen now. Okay. No, I like me better here. Okay. Okay. James Gunn confirms Superman sequel Man of Tomorrow sticks to DC Studios' biggest rule. The launch of the new DC Universe has been a resounding success. And right off the bat, I don't agree. They're hyping it like it was a success. But as we talked about before, they directly tied the Superman movie into Peacemaker Season 2. And Peacemaker Season 2 definitely has some material in it that's not for children. So you're going to take Superman, the most supposedly family-friendly superhero IP of all time, and coming right off of that, you're going to lead into some things that are decidedly not for a general audience, and definitely not for a family audience with small children. So I don't agree that it's been a resounding success. All I agree is that it's been resoundingly hyped. There's been so much talk about it, but remember, I predicted that before the movie dropped. I said it was going to make a lot of money, but it hasn't made as much money as they thought it would make. So it's going to come in at about 600 million. 600 million. I think they thought it was going to, top $1 billion or whatever, but I was like, there's no way. Because of the second thing I said, and that was that the movie was going to be divisive. And it is. And you can't crack the $1 billion mark like that. If you want to crack the $1 billion mark, it's got to be accessible for normies. It's got to be accessible for families. It's got to be available for repeat viewing that you can only see at the theater, so you have to go see it again. There's a lot of things you have to do, but it was rushed on the streaming, and Shmun said that's because of the drop of Peacemaker Season 2. Or maybe it just wasn't doing what they thought it would do. But once again, this article here is continuing the hype that it's a resounding success. And no, it's not. Okay? Anchored by the triumphant debut of its flagship hero, Nope, Superman soared at the box office and earned widespread critical acclaim, establishing a hopeful and powerful foundation for the future of the interconnected franchise. Nope. Superman got his butt kicked for 2 hours. Superman was shown as weak, as incompetent, as broken, as short-tempered, as impatient, as naive as possible. So, nope. The positive reception was so strong that DC Studios wasted no time in cementing the hero's future, quickly placing another Superman-centric film on the calendar. This sequel, titled Man of Tomorrow, was fast-tracked for a 2027 release. Now, hold up a minute. Isn't Schmun the head of DC Studios? So doesn't he get to decide that? So can you see how deceptive this article is if it's saying that the studios were so excited? No, that was him. If you run everything and you're trying to push the narrative that your movie was a success, whether it was or not, of course you can fast track a sequel. That's your call. Okay? So already this is shady and nebulous. A movie that signals the studio's immense confidence in its new direction. Well, some fans might worry that the project is moving too quickly, writer and director James Gunn has assured everyone that DC Studios is strictly adhering to his most important developmental rule. Again, he's in charge. Of course, he can fast track whatever he wants. Of course, he can say whatever he wants. All of it, Gunn stated on Threads when a fan asked how much of the Man of Tomorrow script was finished. Just in the necessary and lengthy stage of rewriting some more. It's been a lot of fun. In the same online conversation, Gunn also noted his collaborative nature during the creative process, confirming that he shares his work with many people for feedback. All sorts of people, yes, I'm very open to feedback always. Once again, questionable, because open to feedback doesn't mean you're going to make changes from that feedback. You're probably just going to take the feedback that you like, or the feedback that agrees with you. Who told him that tying Peacemaker into Superman right away with Peacemaker's decidedly, non-PG content was a good idea? Where's the feedback on that? Who thinks that was a good idea? So leave me some comments below if you think that was a good idea. Who thinks that was the thing to do? So anyway, this is just blah, 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 blah. Okay, so I'm going to skip that paragraph. Man of Tomorrow is not Superman 2. This is really interesting. James Gunn has been very clear, and by the way, I still hate the Superman costume. Looks like you took a basketball and turned it inside out and painted it blue, and it's always dirty. And somehow they, once again, like in Superman Returns, managed to take a costume that's supposed to be brightly colored, with primary colors, mind you, and made it dull. It doesn't pop. James Gunn has been very clear with fans that the upcoming film, while featuring David Cornsweat's hero in a major capacity, is not a traditional sequel and should not be considered Superman 2. That makes no sense to me. What do you mean it's not a traditional sequel? It's a sequel. It's the same actors in the same story world telling the next chapter of the story. So how is that not a sequel? When he says it's not a traditional sequel, that could mean a bunch of different things. That can mean the approach of the story is different. It can mean a lot of different things, but saying it's not a sequel and should not be considered Superman 2 doesn't make any sense. Yes, it is a direct sequel to what you put out there. This distinction became more intriguing when the official announcement for Man of Tomorrow was accompanied by special illustrations depicting Superman alongside his arch nemesis, Lex Luthor, Nicholas Hoult, with Luthor notably wearing his iconic green and purple warsuit from the comics. While plot details remain confidential, the visual pairing strongly suggests the sequel will focus heavily on the complex dynamic between the hero and the villain, potentially forcing them into an uneasy alliance against a more significant threat. Now, right there, I'm already done. I'm already done. Why am I already done? I'll tell you why. Because that already feels like Smallville to me. So in other words, it's Lex Luthor all the time. Now I'm sure, knowing Schmun, he's going to he's going to stuff this thing with characters, just like he stuffed the first movie with characters. So just like we had Ursat's Bizarro, that was, spoiler alert, that was Ultraman. That was in real Ultraman, and we had the Engineer, and we had Lex Luthor, obviously. And so we had Crypto, and then a cameo by Supergirl, and then we had the Justice Gang. So I'm sure that, the Brainiac and maybe Parasite, I'm sure some other villains are going to be in here. But it's already following the pattern of it's just Lex all the time. Like Superman can't appear without Lex Luthor. And I told you I got tired of that pattern a long time ago, where a superhero is now joined to the hip with their arch nemesis, and now somehow they cannot appear unless their arch nemesis is also in the film. So Superman can't appear without Lex Luthor, which I don't like and don't agree with. Batman can't appear without the Joker in there somewhere, which I don't like. It's been Wonder Woman and Cheetah, kind of. So I don't like any of that. So it's already feeling like Smallville to me. Smallville was the story of how that version of Clark became Superman, which he never really did, but that's another conversation. And how that version of Lex became the Lex that we know. That was basically the crux of the story, their relationship. Okay, so this is starting to feel like that. If Lex has to show up in every installment, and also him wearing the green and purple war suit, his mech suit also suggests that they're going to run through years and years and years. But they've already run through, even though the opening crawl said Superman's been active for several years. It looks like they're going to run through years and years of comic history in just a few movies, which makes me wonder, where then do you have to go from there? So him not saying this is a traditional sequel just kind of blows my mind, because it's quite clearly chapter 2 of that story. And then it wouldn't surprise me at all if they do have them team up and all of a sudden they're friends or they're uneasy allies, or we got to fight on the same side or whatever, because that's one of my pet peeves. I hate when they have to do that. So, but that's just me. So I'm not watching this movie anyway. I'm just talking about it because I thought it was interesting this week. I'm not watching this film when it comes out. I am going to watch Supergirl, though. The narrative direction lies perfectly with Luthor's characterization in the first film. Though undeniably a villain, Lex displayed a twisted and proprietary concern for humanity. Nope. Lex is all about himself, as always. Viewing himself as his rightful protector. No. Viewing himself as wanting to get all the power that he can, and resenting this alien for having more power than him. Should Earth face an overwhelming invasion from an intergalactic powerhouse like Brainiac or Mongul, it is entirely plausible that Luthor would choose to fight to protect his planet. See how they're already framing it like Lex Luthor is heroic? So what that is actually in line with is the spin that we've had for several years now, that villains aren't evil, just misunderstood, that villains are really anti-heroes, that many villains are just, hurt heroes in disguise. And no, that weakens your whole narrative tissue if the villain ain't a villain. Now, antagonist does not mean villain. Antagonist just means against the protagonist. So that could be a friend. It just means they're against the goal, the desire line, the protagonist. But villain is pretty self-explanatory. But not having the villains be evil hasn't done anything but weaken the stories. Okay. Such an act would be born from a strategic desire to preserve his own domain and use his role in its salvation as leverage to regain power and public adoration. Now, that line I agree with, because there's nothing noble about it for Lex. It's all about him crowning himself king and thinking that he's the rightful ruler because he's smarter than everybody else. That's narcissism. That's not heroism. Furthering this idea is Gunn's clarification that the movie's title is simply Man of Tomorrow, not Superman Man of Tomorrow. This deliberate choice leaves the title subject open to interpretation, questioning whether the man of tomorrow is the Kryptonian hero who inspires hope, or the human genius who believes he alone can secure humanity's future. If I wasn't already done with this article, I am now after that line. Remember when they first announced that first Superman movie, it was called Superman Legacy. Do you remember that? And we know why it was called Superman Legacy, because of the reveal of Jor-El and Lara sending Kal-El to Earth to take over, to repopulate Earth with Kryptonians and to take as many wives as he could. And it was about continuing the House of El and the Kryptonian race on Earth. That was the plot of the movie, but it was originally called Superman Legacy, and now we know why. So I have no illusions that calling this Man of Tomorrow now is not going to be changed, because it's absolutely subject to be changed. But that last line, that the Man of Tomorrow may or may not be Superman, excuse me, that's always been one of Superman's nicknames. Man of Tomorrow, the last son of Krypton, the Man of Steel. That's always been one of Superman's names. And now they're already alluding to the possibility of that applying to Lex Luthor. That doesn't make any sense to me. That makes no sense to me. Because again, Lex is not a hero. He's not an anti-hero. He's not none of that stuff. But if they're going to try to spin it, which sounds like they might, because Shimon himself has said that he doesn't understand Superman and he can't relate. He understands Lex Luthor, and he can relate to Luthor. That kind of speaks volumes. So I'm going to leave that right there. So again, I am not going to watch this. So the only thing that might make me watch it is if enough people ask me to review it. So if I get enough requests, because the first one, I got request after request after request, DT, what do you think? And so I watched it, and my biggest video short to this day is still my out of the theater reaction to Superman, because I said it was the worst bunch of crap I'd ever seen. So I will link that in the description box underneath this video if you want to see that. I got the most views on that one still to date, because that movie was garbage. It was absolute garbage. And this one sounds like it's going to be more of the same. So if enough people ask me to review it, I might. But other than that, I'm not planning on seeing this foolishness. Okay? Just want to point that out. But now to switch over to what I am planning on seeing is I do plan to see Supergirl. And the only reason that I plan to see Supergirl is because I like Millie Alcock. So I really want to see how she does in the role, because I do like her as an actress, and I think that it's going to be an interesting take on Kara no matter what. But I must warn those of you that are planning on seeing Supergirl, you must read Supergirl, Woman of Tomorrow. Okay, so let me put that up. You have to read this. Okay, that should be on your screen now. I will put a link to this underneath this video so you can check it out. You have to read Supergirl, Woman of Tomorrow. And the reason I say that you have to read it is because you will not be prepared for the version of Supergirl that you see in her movie if you don't read this book, this Tom King book. Now, everybody says it's a direct ripoff of True Grit, but the Supergirl that we meet in this book, that version was hinted at during the cameo at the end of the Superman movie. This Supergirl is going to be reckless. This Supergirl is going to go to a red sun planet on her 21st birthday to get drunk. So she has to go somewhere on a rocket ship where she is depowered so she can actually get drunk, because she can't get drunk when she's powered up. she foolishly takes Krypto with her, forgetting that he'll be depowered too, and then Krypto gets hurt. And that's, so spoiler alert, but that's part of the early plot. That's how everything kicks off. So, I mean, this girl is going to be drunk. She's going to be wild. She's going to be trashy. She's going to be careless. She's going to be just kind of living by her whims. And so if they follow this book, note for note and beat for beat, there's going to be some other revelations too. And those I won't spoil, but they're not spoilers for those that know Supergirl's background lore, like with Comet, for example. But I'm going to leave that right there if you don't know what I'm talking about. So I highly, highly, highly recommend, because you're not going to be ready. My prediction for this movie is that people are going to be shocked. People are absolutely, and by people, I mean the mainstream audience, I mean the normies. Again, you need the mainstream audience if you're going to, get your highest numbers in terms of box office return. So this article from Superhero Hype is talking about how the logo has finally surfaced online 3 months since the production wrapped. It's going to drop June 26th of next year. And here's the logo. Okay. So they said the logo was spotted on the set of the Clayface movie, which actually blows my mind that they're making a Clayface movie. So I understand that Shmun likes the quirky characters. I understand that he loves the underdog characters. I understand that he likes the fringe characters. But I don't know if I agree with his release order for this content, because it seems like it's ping-ponging and yo-yoing back and forth between a major character and a fringe character, then a hero, and then a villain. And I don't know if that's the way to go. Clayface, has evolved in the comics into a monster. Even his look is more monstrous. Guarantee he's just going to be heard and misunderstood. He's going to be like Joker, Joaquin Phoenix's Joker. I can almost guarantee that is what's going to come of this. So even though Shimon is not directing it, he's the head of the studio. And they say it's going to be based on writer Tom King and illustrator Bill Cruz Everly's Woman of Tomorrow comic book series. Okay. Movie will also star Matthias Schoenaerts as Cream of the Yellow Hills and Eve Ridley as Ruthie Mary Noel. David Krumholtz as Zor-El, with Jason Momoa also expected to appear as Lobo. Now, what's going to be interesting is that if Zor-El, Supergirl's father, has the same mandate for Kara that Jor-El had for Kal-El in the first movie. So is Zor-El and Allura Kara's parents? Are they going to tell her that being the woman of tomorrow means birthing Kryptonians? Because how is she going to birth Kryptonians? Now, for those of you that don't know, people have shipped Superman and Supergirl in the comics ever since Supergirl came out. And I know that's gross because they're cousins. Superman himself said in the comic panel that he would marry Kara himself, but there's a law against cousins being married on Krypton. Superman said that himself. So there have always been people that have shipped them together. And I know it's not right, and I know it's nasty, and I know all that, but it still is in the comics. It still happened. So I'm going to show you that panel just so you know I'm not making that up. And there it is. Look at that. Superman, I have a confession to make. I wanted to arrange a happy marriage for you. I failed both times. If I ever did marry, says Superman, it would be to someone super lovable like you. We can't marry because we're cousins, though cousins can marry in certain countries here on Earth. We're both from the planet Krypton, where the marriage of cousins was unlawful. I want you to notice what Superman did not say. He said he would marry someone super lovable like Kara. He didn't say we can't marry because, I'm not feeling that way about you. It's like because we're cousins, it's unlawful and blah, blah, blah. So I wanted to let you know there actually is a comic book precedent for that idea. And yes, it's gross and yes, it's nasty, but still. So I'm saying that because I would not put it past certain people to hint at this relationship. I'm not saying for sure it's going to happen, but I'm saying it might happen. It absolutely might happen that this specific pairing of Kal-El and Kara Zor-El might be at least winked at in the movie. But what I am saying for sure, what I am saying is that you are not going to be prepared for the version of Kara that you meet in this film if you don't read Woman of Tomorrow. According to Shimon, the upcoming movie will show how different Supergirl is from her cousin, Clark Superman, which already worries me. Teasing a much more hardcore version of the hero than what we're used to seeing. Lord have mercy. Just think about what Shimon did to Clark. And like I said, you have to read Woman of Tomorrow to understand how far this goes. It reduces Kara to nothing more than like maybe a college frat party girl who's maybe trying to sow her wild oats but gets caught up in an adventure or whatever. There's nothing noble about this version of Kara as we meet her. Continuing with the article, I think those things are really integral to the two characters and the differences between them, and that Clark really does have sort of this really happy childhood. I mean, he had parents who loved him in an easygoing upbringing, and it makes him the least dysfunctional of superheroes in so many ways. And Supergirl, especially DCU Supergirl, she's kind of a mess. That's not true. The retcon rebranded, relaunched Supergirl when they did it with Batman and Superman, and the girl who fell from the sky, the Supergirl from Krypton. When they brought Kara back, she was Bratty Girl. So the original Kara, the one I just showed you in that picture, she wasn't like that. She wasn't a mess at all. She looked up to Clark. She was striving to be like Clark. She was trying to be the same kind of hero that he was, and that's all throughout the Silver Age. So that's not true that Supergirl has always been, quote unquote, a mess. But if Shimon says she's a mess, if you're familiar with his work, I want you to imagine what a mess would look like in his mind. So, I mean, she's had real issues growing up, and it's based on a comic where she watched person after person after person dying in front of her as her piece of the planet disintegrated. So, I mean, I'm going to watch it because I like Millie. I'm not going to watch it because I have any confidence that they're going to tell a good story about her. But I want to see what Millie does with the role. All of the Supergirls so far have been different. Helen Slater, Laura Vandervoort on Smallville, Melissa Benoit. I refuse to call her Benoist because the proper pronunciation of her name is Benoit. Melissa Benoit on the Supergirl show and the Superman and Lois show. She gets out on that. And The Flash. So she was a CW Supergirl on many iterations. So tired of my clock popping up. Lord have mercy. Can I get away from my clock? I guess not. So then Sasha Calle, who only had the one and done in that ludicrous, horrific Flash movie, which we all knew was going to tank and we all knew was a mistake. I did like Sasha in it, though. But that Snyderverse Supergirl, and that's all over. That was actually Flashpoint Snyderverse Supergirl, but whatever. And now we have Millie. And so we'll have to see, not counting the animated versions. So we'll have to see, because I do like Kara as a character. I don't always agree with the directions they've taken her character, but I want to see how this pans out. So I'm definitely planning on seeing the Supergirl movie. But I'm not planning on seeing Man of Tomorrow unless I get asked by enough people to review it. So just keeping it real, just keeping a buck with you. Just letting you know how that's going. So tell me what you think. Those of you that are watching me live, give me some comments, or leave me some comments below if you're watching this video on the replay if you missed the live stream. What do you think about the whole super thing I talked about? Man of tomorrow, woman of tomorrow, characterizations, what the articles were saying. Let me know what you think about that. Okay? So that is subject one. That's subject one under super. Next subject we're going to do is zombies, because I want to briefly talk about Marvel zombies. Now, first of all, the first thing I want to say is that I've always felt like this story should have been a one and done. I've always felt like this story was, maybe a funny kind of Walking Dead spin on things when it first came out, and maybe they had fun with it, and it should have lived and died right there. But now that they're doing this animated spinoff and all this different kind of stuff, I don't know. So we're on IGN. Marvel Zombies trailer reveals great first look at Blade Knight. That's Moon Knight as Blade, or Blade as Moon Knight, as MCU actors return for a TV MA spinoff. Revealing a sneak peek at our heroes like Blade, Ms. Marvel. Of course, Kamala Khan is in it. Shang-Chi, Spider-Man, and more will cut their way through a bloody apocalypse. See, I just think it's a wacky one-off fringe idea. I don't think that it needs its own anything. I don't think it needs an animated series. I don't think it needs any of that. So it was, a wacky spinoff in the comics or whatever. So I'm not going to play the video because, Lord have mercy, every time I play a video, my videos get demonetized, and I'm tired of that. So plenty of places you can watch the trailer, but I'm not going to play that. I'd like to, but I'm tired of my videos getting demonetized. So sorry about that. So let's talk about this right here. There's more than a few blinking and missing moments in the trailer, including what appears to be zombified versions of classic comic book characters like Hawkeye, Abomination, Namor, and more as they help assemble an undead army. As Yelena Belova warns that the Avengers are dead, we also get a first look at a face fans have wanted to see for a long time, Blade. Now, Yelena, I like Yelena. I know a lot of people hate Yelena. I like Yelena. I liked her from the beginning, but I understand a lot of people don't like her, and I understand why they don't. Well, she's another character that they're trying so hard to push, like Kamala Khan. They're trying so hard to make Yelena happen, just like they tried to make Carol Danvers as Captain Marvel happen, just like they're still trying to make Kamala Khan and Ms. Marvel happen. They're trying so hard to make Yelena Belova happen. I think she has a fan base. I just don't think it's a huge one. I do like her, but I understand why people don't. And she's never going to be a substitute for Natasha. But what they don't get is that they refuse to give us the characters that made the MCU. They refuse to give us the characters that we fell in love with more often than not. And they keep squeezing in the very bad book-to-screen translation offshoot characters. If they had done better book-to-screen translations of like Namor, for example, or She-Hulk, or Shang-Chi or anything, that might be a different story. But they keep pushing characters that don't nobody care about, and they keep pushing their version of the characters, which are awful versions. Okay? This isn't quite the Blade audiences have expected Mahershala Ali to portray in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, though. Instead, this is a Moon Knight-esque version of the Daywalker known as Blade Knight. While Ali's Blade is still coming together for an MCU debut, this take on the character is played by Invincible and Starfleet veteran Todd Williams. So it's not going to be the Blade we know. It's going to be Blade and Moon Knight smushed together. While Blade Knight steals the show in the first trailer, fan favorite MCU actors have returned to reprise some of their roles. So Scarlet Witch by Elizabeth Olsen, Paul Rudd as Ant-Man, Florence Pugh, Yelena, David Harbour, Red Guardian, which, see, that whole Black Widow movie, I think was the wrong direction. They gave Natasha this goofy, kind of funny, kind of, sitcom, fake family background, and I think that was a mistake. And now they're still using those same characters. And Thunderbolts in here. Tessa Thompson as Valkyrie, never liked that, never liked her. Simu Liu, Shang-Chi, Aquafina's in this, voicing this, and Katie Haley Steinfeld is Kate Bishop. Haley is way more likable than Kate Bishop. I think Haley has kind of been the saving grace of Kate Bishop in live action, or Kate Bishop in the MCU, live action and in animation, because Kate Bishop in the comics is insufferable, but Haley is way more likable. Wyatt Russell as U.S. agent, we're supposed to hate him. Randall Park as Jimmy Woo and Iman Vellani as Ms. Marvel. It's so funny. It's so funny. It's such a contradiction. It's such a juxtaposition with Ms. Marvel because we love Iman Vellani and don't nobody care about Kamala Khan. It's really something. And Dominique Thorne as Ironheart. Ironheart, which almost every reviewer said Ironheart was the worst MCU series they ever made. They had so little confidence in it. They released it in 2 3-episode installments. 3 episodes one week, 3 episodes the next week, and it was done. And it was almost universally panned. That's another show that they've tried so hard to hype, and that's another character that they've tried so hard to say is a hit and so beloved by fans, and blah, de blah, de blah. Okay? That's what they keep saying, but that's hype. I don't think that's real. And so when it comes to the Marvel Zombies, I don't see the draw if you don't know it from the comics, because my question there is, do you really want to see zombified versions of your favorite MCU characters? Like, is that really what you want to see? I mean, a general audience. So again, comic book people know this story, but does the general audience really want to see this? I just think it's too fringe, too quirky of an idea. Everything else that they put out this year has failed or flopped or underperformed. I mean, everything. I mean, 2025 has been probably one of the worst years for Marvel. Probably one of the worst years for Marvel. I'm always trying to see if I can find that graphic that I like. I think it belongs to the DA. I think it belongs to Derek Anderson, where he basically has, flop, 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 this kind of thing. So, trying to pull it up here. Okay, so let me pull that up. But everything that they've dropped this year has just been awful. I mean, it's just been awful. It's just been awful. So we got that ridiculous Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man. Everybody, as soon as we saw the costume for that mug, we knew that was awful. And then we got Captain America Brave New World, which, didn't beat Ant-Man in the numbers, if I'm not mistaken. So it's in a lower tier in terms of box office. And then the Daredevil Born Again series, which severely underperformed because it was so boring. It was surprisingly bad. It wasn't just bad, it was surprisingly bad. Then we had the Thunderbolts, which again did very low numbers. They kept saying it was the best Marvel movie ever, because they say that with everything, that it's the best Marvel thing since the last Marvel thing. Then we got Ironheart, where she's a villain. She steals, she breaks and enters, kills people, and made a deal with the devil. Okay, and then we had Fantastic Four, which turned out to be a fantastic flop, which is probably why they're trying to move on so quickly, because they thought Fantastic Four was going to be this triumphant return to form. for the MCU, and it really wasn't. And then they had Eyes of Wakanda, which I don't even remember seeing any advertising for. When did they advertise for Eyes of Wakanda? So next up is Marvel Zombies. And like I said, I just don't have a lot of confidence going forward that this is going to do anything. And then finally, they're doing Black Wonder Man. And yes, I'm calling it Black Wonder Man. They're not doing Simon Williams from the comics that we've known for decades. Simon Williams, that has a huge fan base. No, they're doing Ultimate Simon Williams because the MCU pulls mainly from the Ultimates universe. And in Ultimates universe, Simon Williams is not Caucasian. So they're going to use Black Wonder Man. And I'm like, already, people are longtime fans of Wonder Man are already shaking their heads at this particular version because they're not happy unless they're race swapping. They're not happy unless they're gender swapping. They're not happy unless they're putting the men down so they can lift the women up. They're not happy unless they're forcing fringe characters. They're not happy unless they're giving us everything we don't want. Because the business model switched with superheroes. They stopped making content for fans about after Marvel Phase 2. They started making content that they wanted and calling us names if we didn't like it. They make content for themselves and then try to sell it to us. They're not making the content that we like. Okay? And finally, my final topic today is about this tweet I made yesterday or 2 days ago. I have to see when I pull it up. But anyway, I made it sometime this week. Okay? And yeah, it was yesterday. And so I want to talk about it because I got so much response to it. Okay, got so much response to it. So let me pull it up. And here it is. Okay, so the tweet I was quote tweeting said, "What movie opinion gets you like this?" And that's one of those ones where it's got the meme, "Yes, you are all wrong." So what movie opinion gets you like this, where you've got something to say and you're telling everybody else that they're wrong? So of course, I answered that with something I've been saying for a while, which is Spider-Man having organic webs makes way more sense because it just does. Spider-Man had organic webbing in the Tobey Maguire, the Sam Raimi first film, but all of Tobey Maguire's outings, the Sam Raimi trilogy of Spider-Man films, Spider-Man's webbing was organic. Actually came out of his arm because you can see it from the spider bite on his wrist, but also his mutation had grown spinnerets in his forearm, okay, right on his wrist. And so he was able to make his own webs from that. That has always made the most sense to me because it doesn't make any sense that Peter Parker gets bitten by the radioactive spider and it rewrites his DNA and it mutates him to the point where it gives him the properties of a spider. It just gives him the good parts. Now, there have been Spider-Man stories where they took it all the way to body horror and made it more like The Fly, where Peter actually turned into a spider and got all the parts of being a human spider. That's been explored in the comics more than once. So, you know, he got the multiple eyes and he got the hairy back and he was a human spider. So we've seen the ugly side, but the cool, convenient thing about his original origin story is that he just got the cool parts of being a spider, except he couldn't make his own webs. That particular twist in the lore has never made any sense to me ever. That has never made any sense to me ever from the beginning. So that's what I said. I know everybody hates it. I don't know why they hate it, but still, that's my opinion. Spider-Man having organic webs that he himself generates, if he's got all the other attributes and qualities of a spider, which actually the Raimi trilogy also purports that it was a super spider that bit him, meaning it was different species of spiders that they had genetically combined into a super spider, because all spiders can't all do the same things. So the webbing, the wall crawling, the super strength, the spider sense, the speed, all that actually comes from a genetic mix of spiders that they all combined into super spider, and that's what bit Peter. Okay, so that was kind of the twist of, in the comics, it was just a spider bit me. But in the Raimi trilogy, it was a genetically modified super spider that pulled from different species that bit Peter. Okay, so let's look at some of the responses I got. Dreams Uncharted said the only reason they were mechanical to begin with is that they were plagiarized from a Golden Age hero, Spider Queen. They could have just made them biologically make the swipe less obvious, but no. Wow. If that's true, I said that's very interesting. If that's true, if this was an influence or a direct ripoff from Spider Queen to give Peter those mechanical web shooters. That's really interesting if that's the case. Now, I know the argument, and comic purists, because I told you I'm not a comic purist, I'm a character purist. Comic purists, comic purists, every time I say something like this, and just go ballistic and go crazy. And we have to showcase Peter's genius, and it's what makes him different from everybody else is that he had the genius to build his own web shooters, and you take that away, it's not Peter Parker and blah, 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 blah. There's a way to have both, okay? And I said it. And here Star Wars Timeline Ben says, I thought the same since the movie came out. Ordered those comic book purists at my store, chew my behind out every day. This will chew me out of my timeline for posting that. I don't care, okay? Matt Overlord Studio said, I agree with you a lot in your comments and opinions, but you lost me on this one. And I said, I know everybody hates it, but that was the point of the question. Is that everybody would have, I know that, but I don't care. This is my opinion. I am team organic web shooters because they make the most sense. Okay. Interesting conversation with Rupert Martin. Right, where does all the webbing come from? How much and what does he have to eat in order to biologically produce enough webbing to simply shoot a web over the next skyscraper? Now, once again, it's comic book physics. It's comic book logic. If we're going to accept that a radioactive spider bite could mutate his DNA and rewrite it to include spider qualities, then we don't have to try to bog it down in a real world idea of how does he generate the webs. But I said, that's what I basically said. If a radioactive bite can rewrite his DNA, it can give him spinnerets and glands that produce web fluid. That also wouldn't be based on caloric consumption if we're just going to go there. Okay, with Flash, we can make the argument that Flash needs lots and lots of calories because he's expending energy running at high speeds. Producing webs would not necessarily be correlated to caloric consumption. I buy it if the webbing was supplied by doorway into a pocket dimension populated by nothing but webbing, but that has nothing to do with spiders. More importantly, removing the need for web fluid and shooters diminishes Peter's tech wizardry abilities. That's the whole argument. That it just takes away from who Peter is if he doesn't build his own web shooters. Then Jonathan Zuhai asked his questions. If Peter Parker could make his own web shooters and fluid, why not just sell it to the military and make a fortune? What's stopping Mary Jane or Gwen from stopping their own web shooters and using them in an emergency, like the next time Venom or Mysterio is on a rampage? Reed Richards realized that and did try to make some money from his inventions. Peter never saw it that way. That's why when Doc Ock took over his life, that story was called The Superior Spider-Man. Doc Ock, as Peter, made so many improvements to being Spider-Man that Peter never thought about. So it actually took a villain coming in and taking over his life for Peter to have a bigger picture thinking of that, because he most certainly could have patented web fluid and used it in many, many different applications. Okay. The second part of the answer to the question is, why did Mary Jane or Gwen just use the web shooters? Is because it would take more than the web shooters. It takes strength and agility, reflexes, spider sense to go up against metahuman or enhanced foes. And he said that the argument is that they can still be worn by anyone, but they could use it against, minor criminals like muggers and burglars. But maybe that's pushing it, but you're still just a normal person going up against normal people that would be armed. So maybe it would work, maybe it won't. But I understand his point that if they're mechanical, anybody can wear them. Okay? So here's what I said about how you have both. It's so obvious to me. I know we need to see Peter's genius, but there's a way to have both. Peter creates WebShooters that help him control his organic webs and form different shapes with it, even reinforcing their strength when he needs to hold something heavy. Simple, boom, done. Wade Bisky said, dude, this should have been, that makes so much more sense. I said, thanks. It also adds more storytelling capabilities if he has to actually learn how to spin webs and the different shapes that spiders can form with them. Do you understand? So his body generates web fluid, but maybe naturally he can only spin it in a line, like we saw in the movie, like we saw Toby do. Maybe he can only do that naturally, spin a line. What if Spider-Man has to learn how to make different shapes like spiders do? The bigger webs, the thing you see him do in the Amazing Spider-Man 2, or no, Amazing Spider-Man 1, where he webs up the lizard cocoon shapes, and then he does a big web Andrew Garfield is, riding on, and different things that spiders can do. What if Spider-Man actually had to learn that? See, that's far more interesting to me. So he can generate the webs, but he has to build mechanical web shooters to help him control them, to form shapes with them, to learn how to do certain things that spiders do. I would love that. Okay, that's what would work for me. Okay, just my opinion. Don Gill said we shouldn't go down that rabbit hole. We'd all recognize it in the wrong place in his body. That the genetic changes were selective, so then come out of his wrist, no problems. Okay. Why not his feet too? But he's got the sticky wall crawling hairs on his feet too, blah, blah, blah. So I also talked about how he should have got some type of multi-vector spider vision with a multiple eye thing. And Don said, I think they tried that with spider sense. Well, if you know anything about actual spiders, spider sense is actually, the spiders have hairs all over their bodies. And when they feel wind blowing past them, they know something is near. There could be danger. And that's when they spring out of the way. That's actually real life spider sense. So the way they do it in Peter doesn't make any sense. Peter senses danger sometimes blocks away, and there's no wind resistance or alert involved. So the spider sense that Spider-Man has is not correlated in any way, shape, or form to the actual way a real spider, like if you're trying to smash a spider and it senses you coming, is because it feels the wind from your hand or your foot coming toward it. That's why it runs. That's spider sense in real life. So that's what I'm saying. If we're dealing with comic book physics, the spinnerets and the glands in the wrist still work as far as I'm concerned. Okay, John McBride says, I prefer the traditional web shooters, but for this movie, it did make more sense. Isn't a bad idea at all. Ticklante said, it's one of few retcons that have me like, why wasn't he like this in the first place? Exactly. That was my exact response. Why hasn't Spider-Man always been able to make his own webs? Okay. Real Popcorn Geek said, said, I agree. DJ Terry said, thought it made sense for a movie that didn't have time to show Peter develop the formula. The Amazing Spider-Man cheated. MCU just skipped his whole origin, all of which is true. Okay. That's not controversial at all, says Randy M. The Elusive Eye. I always thought web shooters were stupid, and without them, he's just wall crawling man. That's right. There have been some what if stories of what if somebody besides Peter Parker became Spider-Man. One of them was Flash Thompson. And because Flash Thompson didn't know how to make web shooters, at least the first time he appears as Spider-Man, he dies. because he's Captain Spider and he falls off a building. Okay, I'm going to pull that up for you so you can see I'm not just making that up. And here it is. That's Flash Thompson as Spider-Man. Okay, he has a cape. He doesn't have the underarm webbing. He actually has a cape. All right, then evildoers, you better look out. It tells you how old this is. Evildoers tells you how old this is. Because Captain Spider is coming. Yeah, in that issue, that's a what if issue, he dies because he doesn't have webbing. So I can kind of see that point, but it still makes more sense if they're organic. Okay. Siege says Ultimate Truth. Super Dungeon Robot thinks so as well. Vane says, I like these with Spider. Nerd was able to invent his webbing and web shooters. I get it. No organic webs. 100% for organic webbing. So much better narratively. And if you're going to give Spider-Man organic webs, having him bite and inject venom into villains. Now, that's another thing they did with Spider-Man 2099. They gave Miguel fangs. And they also gave Miles Morales electric powers. And so Miguel, Spider-Man 2099, also has claws. So they did different twists on what happens with the spider bite. Okay. So, but that's always my movie opinion, that the web should have been organic all along. Okay. So let me know what you think about that in the comments below. Okay. I got some comments, so let me pull that up. Okay, Cajun, nice to see you, Cajun. Says, yeah, that threw me off in the movies, but I think it worked. Yeah, I know we were expecting Peter to be traditional Peter in terms of making all that. But it did work for the movie. But like I said, I've always thought it would work permanently. It always just made way more sense to me. Like I said, there's a way you can have both. You just have to be creative enough, okay? Because you definitely can have both. All right. So that's it for this live stream. Thanks to everybody that joined me live. Thanks to everybody that's watching on replay. Don't forget to leave me some comments below the video. Below this video, I'm going to link a link for Supergirl Woman of Tomorrow. And I'm also going to link my straight out of the theater short that got the most views because I want you to check those out. And also, I'm going to relaunch my Kickstarter again soon, because I'm trying this again because I'm determined to get my book out there. Okay, I already have some books out there, but I'm determined to get this book out there, and I'm going to need your help to do it. So stay tuned for all that. I will let you know. All right? Thanks so much again. You know, I appreciate all of you. You know, I do this because I love comic books just like you, and I love superheroes just like you. So that's why I come out here, and I do my DT2 Comics Chat, weekly Comics Chat. All right? I'll talk to you soon. I am out.